Right. Hey, folks, I am Faz from Fazlifts. Today, I want to share with you 3 ways in which people screw up progressive overload, meaning they don't make gains in the long haul. So, first, before we get onto that, wherever you're listening to this, give it a like, comment, share, all helps the algorithm. Right. So, and also, if you would like to ask me a question, there is a link down below in YouTube to a form where you can ask me a question. If you're listening to this on Instagram, then just drop me a question in the comments. All right, thank you. So 3 ways which you're screwing up progressive overload. We all know that to get bigger over time, we've got to get stronger progressively stronger in great form for moderate rep ranges in the big compound lifts. Now, I'm going to share with you 3 ways in which people generally screw that up over the course of many months and eventually over the course of many years, leading to stagnation and just an acceptance that they're never going to be big, which is a damn shame if you want to get bigger. So first way is you are constantly switching main exercises every single block, making it impossible to track any long-term progression. So what I mean by that is this. If you're, let's take an example of legs, quads. If your main lift right now for the next sort of couple of months is the squat, great, happy days. So you build up to the point where you're working at fairly reasonable poundages, and that might take a few weeks. So let's say your max for a set of 5 in the squat is, I don't know, 100 kilos. So you started at about 90, then went to 95, then went to 100, and you're finally working hard. You spend a few weeks there. Hopefully you spend a few weeks there. Now, when that gets hard, you say, okay, that's the end of the cycle. I'm done now. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to go for a new routine. And you might even rationalize it. Like you might even be sitting there thinking, I actually know what I'm doing. You might even be a coach and still getting this wrong. And you might say, you might plan it all as in trying to make it all part and parcel of a long-term plan. Say, yes, now I'm going to go back to a different variation, and then I'm going to circle back to it. So your next variation for the next couple of months could be the pendulum squat. And then the next variation could be like a hack squat. And the next variation could be a Smith squat with a reverse band. And it's about 8 months or so before you get back around to doing squats. And so we want to hopefully see improvement, but you've not done squats for 8 months at this stage as a main movement. So odds are you're probably not going to jump right in on heavier poundages. So again, you might jump in at about 90, 95, build up a little bit. And before you know it, something's got in the way in life. Perhaps you've got a cold, Corona's hit, all kinds of stuff gets in the way. Perhaps you've done a bit of dieting and you just sort of rationalize to yourself, you know what? I'm right about the same place that I was 8 months ago. So what progress have you actually made in those 8 months? I can answer that for you. You've made absolutely 0 progress. That's 8 months wasted, all because all you've done is just constantly switched your main exercise around, and you've just been in that building up phase for 4 to 8 weeks at a time. Essentially, though, you've never really grafted for any period of time on that one lift, making that effort, translating that effort into more strength and more muscle mass. I think one of the reasons that I got such great results when I was first started training is because I got into powerlifting straight away. My big 3 were the squat, bench, and deadlift, and there was no messing around with those lifts. There was no partials, there was no reverse bands, there was nothing like that. There was no force reps, there were no spotters. It was either get better or you're going to stagnate. And so what a lot of people do these days is they strategically change exercises, and that's just not a good way to do things, because by the end of that sort of 6 to 8 month stretch, when they realize they go back to the first exercise, if they realize that they've just not progressed at all, then it's a sad thing. So you've got to be able to deliver the stress onto the muscle. And if you're constantly changing exercises, you're not able to deliver that stress. So that is the first way you screw up progressive overload. You constantly switch main exercises around every block, which makes it impossible to track any long-term progression. The next thing is the exercises you mostly use have no real strength standards. So, for example, if I asked you how much you squat, you might say, hey, I do 100 for 8. Like, great, that's fantastic. Yeah, but I do it with a double reverse blue band on a Smith machine. Okay, I have no idea what that is, whether it's impressive or not. All I know is you can typically lift quite a lot more weight with a double reverse band. I don't actually know if it's impressive. I don't know if it's going to provide you with that muscle stimulation. I don't know all these things. All I know is with that type of exercise, it's very, very abstract. It's very odd. All right. We can't compare that to a regular squat for, say, 100 for 8. We don't really know whether it's good or not. You might be loading up the bar with an absolute ton of weight, but if you're taking off a ton of weight with bands, you're doing partial reps, you're getting forced reps, all that kind of stuff. How do we know whether it's impressive? We don't really know. We can't set it against a standard. And again, going back to when I was just coming up and building the bulk of my muscle mass and strength, if I could squat 180, I knew where I was, because a squat for 180, it gives me an abstract definition of, okay, this is good. Now, not saying that everyone has to do the 3 barbell lifts, but the idea is you should try and avoid exercises which are just far too esoteric. Like, I see a lot of bands used with a lot of reverse bands that, and again, nothing inherently horrendous about them, but it does mean that it becomes very difficult to track overall progress. Final thing is, form tends to allow for the most weight to be used at the expense of ROM and stimulus. So the final mistake is using the form which puts you in the strongest position. Now, some prime offenders here are people who use machines and then aim to basically position themselves in the machine to use the most amount of weight. Like, you'll see people doing rows and standing away from the row. And what that does is the fulcrum of the weight, it makes it nice and high, which means you can lift a hell of a lot of weight on that under the disguise of, I feel this better. The thing is, you are supposed to sit in the machine and overcome the odd angle. That's why it's designed. So Hammer Strength, for example, who work with thousands of athletes and put in hours and hours in making their machines with the best strength profiles, Gary with 5GCSEs does not know the machine better or by standing up away from it and saying this works for my body. No, Gary, you don't. You're a waste of space. Just do the machine properly like you're supposed to do, and then load it gradually over time. Don't do it in the mechanically most advantageous position. The idea is you're a bodybuilder. You are supposed to make the exercise as hard as possible, not as easy as possible. So this goes alongside point 2, which is using odd esoteric exercises. Generally, as a general rule, you'll notice if you really look deep into what some of these guys are doing who really misrepresent what progressive overload is, all their tricky variations, all the variations they talk about to say that, hey, this is better for my body, tend to allow them to lift more weight. Very rarely do you get one of these guys who are part of the whole progressive overload crowd making the exercise harder for themselves. They always tend to make it easier so they can lift more weight, whether that's double reverse bands, whether it's partial reps like benching like this and then stopping halfway down, or overhead pressing and stopping halfway down, or using odd angles on machines, or again, the bands. All of these, if you really look at what they're doing, it's designed to make the exercise easier, and that's another way they screw up progressive overload. So how do we combat this? Now, the first thing is have yourself a marker of progression. A marker of progression which you're sticking to for the long term. So we're not changing exercises and main exercises every 2 months or 6 weeks or 5 weeks. We are keeping one solid exercise which we can maintain and is suited to our body for a course of maybe 6 months to a year. We can change around our assistance exercises, other exercises, sure, no problem, but keep that one exercise so you know whether your legs or chest or back or whatever area it is actually getting stronger and bigger or not. Don't constantly change around exercises, because that is a very dangerous game to play if you are trying to make progress, because you go 4 to 6 months without really concretely knowing if you actually progressed or not. And next thing is stick to at least a base of regular exercises. So try and make the exercise as hard as possible, not as easy as possible. I don't mind some use of the reverse bands and the partial range of motion and all that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. Okay, I don't personally use it. I don't think it's a great idea because it puts a lot of people wrong for the reasons that I've stated. However, remember what your goal is. Your goal is to make the movement as hard as possible, not as easy as possible. You are not just a strength athlete on bodybuilding machines. Remember that. Let that sink in. You are not just a strength athlete on bodybuilding machines. All right, folks, hopefully that was helpful. If it was, give me a like, comment, share would be nice. And yeah, share my work. People, I always find that difficult, but share my work on social media. If you like this, if you find it useful, it helps other people get the message out there. And if you want to ask me a question, and you're on YouTube, click on the link below and you can see a link towards asking me a question. If you want to work with me, there's also a link to apply for coaching. If you're seeing this on Instagram, comment would be great. All right, take care. Thanks.